I'm excited because she's back after being on campus within maybe the past decade. She is a friend and former college roommate of one of our previous guests, Natasha Nielsen. But in the day-to-day, 9 to 5, she's the CEO of a company called Mason, hardware/software startup out of Seattle. I got to know them because when I was up there scouting for an alum like 5 years ago, I found this company, and it was, I won't spoil some of it. I went into the CEO and to meet him, and they were like literally in a house, like some residential house, like 5 employees. And I was like, okay, this is like true grit, small scale stuff. Nowhere near that anymore. They have grown tremendously, and I'm excited to have her tell you all about it today. The company was originally launched in Detroit before they moved out to Seattle. They went through Y Combinator in 2016. They raised $25 million in 2019. They have expanded their workforce. I think they've doubled it since 2019 in that time. So hiring like crazy. She previously, though, before she came over to be CEO at Mason, was a product manager over at Oculus and Facebook. And as always, she has roots, as mentioned here in Ann Arbor, where she got her dual degree in English Lit and a BBA. She had a minor in Chinese language studies. She was active in the Entrepreneurship Club, Empower, Delta Gamma, and she launched the first startup weekend in Ann Arbor in 2011. And lo and behold, she was highly active in CFE, and she was just like you sitting in these seats coming to EHour, even after she wasn't registered and she snuck in class, which we highly encourage all the time, and you're welcome to do. So please help me welcome Nancy Xiao. All right. You're welcome.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I'm super excited to be here, you guys. Like Eric mentioned, I was sitting in the seat not that long ago, which is really surreal to me. It also makes me feel really old that maybe some of you guys were born after 2000, so that's a whole nother thing that I won't think about today. But I'm super excited to share a couple things with you today. I'm going to talk a little bit maybe differently from other speakers you've had before, because I really want to break down this conversation into 2 parts. Obviously, we'll kind of go through the whole CFE mantra through this, but really what I wanted to share with you guys today was a couple different things. One, values that have carried me through my life, my career, that I think would be really valuable for you being a student today. And some questions to consider when you're thinking about joining a startup. I just want to be as real as I can with you guys. I'm going to give you the real scoop. I'm going to treat this like a one-on-one conversation and want to share with you things that I wish somebody maybe had told me when I was sitting in these seats not that long ago. So a little bit of background, like Eric mentioned, I went to Michigan. I grew up in Seattle, studied English, so shout out to my LS&A people. Also went to Ross. And right now I'm the CEO of Mason. We're an 85-person startup. We're on a mission to build a platform that enables any company to build their own smart device. So if you're building the next Peloton, the next Square, or maybe you're Delta Airlines, you're trying to build a connected fleet of devices, connecting your flight attendants, your baggage claim folks, your people at the front gate, we build all the hardware, software, and services that enable you to be able to do that. And we've grown a lot over the last 6 years or so. Right after school, I went to Facebook. I was there for just over 5 years, where I worked on a couple different teams. I worked on app development platform called Parse that had been acquired. I started my career in product marketing there, and then I moved into product management at the Oculus team, which was the team that was brought in to start the virtual reality division. So that was a really fun journey. I joined Oculus when it had also been pretty recently acquired, and the very first headset was still in pre-order. And so there's a lot of stories that I can share with you later about what that was like and some of the challenges there. But one of the first values I wanted to share with you was one that I learned about at Facebook. It was something that was repeated a lot there, and it was called, "What would you do if you weren't afraid?" And I wanted to share that with you guys because it feels really applicable to sort of like this point in where you are in your time at school. I think that this phrase really captures the ethos of how to be successful in startups and in technology. It's about taking swings. It's about taking risks, right? One of our investors always tells us, like, I would rather you just take a really big swing and take a really big risk and totally eat it than just look back and wonder, like, oh, what would have happened if we tried a little bit more, or if we tried something a little bit crazier, right? And so when I say taking a risk and taking a big swing, you know, like, being a student right now, you're in the perfect position to be able to do that, to be able to try a bunch of stuff, right? And when I say take a big risk, I'm not saying, like, don't go drop out of school tomorrow and start a company and go fundraise. Like, that is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something way simpler than that, which is trying something new, just experimenting, putting yourself out there, right? Seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, right? It's about trying something every single day that scares you just a little bit. When I was in school, there was a lot of different things I did that scared me just a little bit. I went to hackathons while I was here, learned to code, learned to do design work, learned to do a lot of things that didn't quite fit, somebody who's an English major, right? And I thought that those were all things that really contributed to where I am today. I'll tell you a couple other stories about things that really scared me. One of the hacks that I had when I was in school was I would go to conferences, and I would say, hey, you guys are doing a cool conference, I want to come, but I'm poor and cheap. So do you have a student ticket, or can I volunteer and help out or something? And that was how I actually ended up attending a lot of different interesting conferences kind of all over the country when I was in school. And in one of those conferences, I got this job of escorting speakers from the green room to the stage. So I had about 20 seconds pretty much with every single person who was speaking there. And throughout that day, they had amazing people come in. I got to meet the CEO of Etsy. I got to meet the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers and owner of Quicken Loans. His name is Dan Gilbert. And I had about 30 seconds with this guy, and I was definitely going to shit a brick. Like, this guy, I have nothing in common with him, right? Like, I don't own a basketball, let alone a basketball team. I have nothing to do with his industry or mortgages or anything like that, but I just, decided to shoot my shot, was a little bit nervous, and I walked up to him and I, told him about some stuff I was working on, told him about the nonprofit I was trying to start, and to my surprise, he wanted to help. He was like, just let me know. This is how you contact me. You put your best students on a bus, bring them to Detroit, and we'll show you around for the day. And that created what has become a 10-year-long friendship and mentorship relationship that I have with him. And by the end of my time at school, he offered me a job. And this would have never happened if I hadn't just been afraid and decided to do nothing about it, right? It's just these little things, right, can lead to really huge outcomes. It's not always about the big thing and the big headline. It's these little things that add up. At Mason, every single day, I do something that scares the living crap out of me. It's something I've never done before, right? Like, hiring your first executive team when, they've got 30 years of experience on you is not easy. Launching a new hardware product into the market, not knowing what's going to happen, right? All this stuff is really scary. So, kind of going back to this, like, try to do something that scares you a little bit. Just today, tomorrow, the day after that. That's sort of the first value that I've tried to live by that's really, really helped me get to where I am today. The second one is one that we live by at Mason. It's called Owners Be Owning. And it means that you get to own your journey, right? And nobody else is here to tell you what you should be or what you should become or what's going to happen next. And I think oftentimes people get caught up, especially at school, because of what your peers are doing or what you're seeing in the headlines, that you have to go start a company, or you have to be an engineer, or you have to do all these different things. And I just want to tell you that that's just not true. You get to own your journey, define your outcome. I tell people all the time that careers are a marathon, and so you don't have to knock out everything in your first mile, right? You can try a bunch of different things. You can get into a bunch of different industries. You don't have to start your company the first thing you do out of school, right? You can pick up a lot of learnings and then go figure it out. The other thing about this value that's really important to me is that you can do things even if you feel like you don't belong and if you don't look like everybody else in the room, or if you come from a different background, right? I think I felt like I didn't belong a lot of times when I was an English major and all my friends were engineers, and I felt like, how am I possibly going to break into tech, right? Like, I don't have hard skills, I can't code, right? But the secret here is that it's actually pretty important when you're starting a team or building something to have people from every walk of life contributing, right? There's a lot of value in people who can communicate, people who can design things, people who can keep track of things and project management, do project management. So ownership of your own journey, figure it out, own it, do whatever it takes that feels right to you, and don't feel like you have to follow someone else's journey or do exactly what they did or what your parents are probably telling you to do. So switching gears a little bit, I wanted to share a little bit about things I wish people had told me before I jumped into the startup world. There's 3 things I wanted to share with you guys. One is, before you join a startup, know a few things. You got to be really comfortable with constant ambiguity. It is constant chaos. Like, every single day feels like a week. It is not something where, oh, the ship is sailing in the right direction. You know exactly what's coming, and the next day and the next day. This week, I can tell you this week alone, the last 24 hours has been really chaotic for me. And so if that's something that's not exciting to you or gets you out of bed, that's okay, right? Like, maybe you should be at something that's a little bit later stage. Maybe you should be somewhere more mature, and that's totally fine. But you get to figure out, you get to own that journey. Don't feel like you have to do something super early stage or seed stage or start your own company. The second thing is, going into a startup is really important to go in with a growth mindset and a really low ego. The people I've seen who are most successful in this world are people who prioritize learning over anything else, like titles or fame and glory or anything like that. Because ultimately, at a startup, there's this phrase that people say all the time, like, you're wearing a lot of different hats, and that's true. I can tell you that at Mason, I've been an HR person, I've been an engineering manager, I've been a marketing leader, I've been pretty much every role that we have, and those moments of discomfort are when I'm learning and growing the most. And being open to that is what's really allowed me to really grow in my career and my journey here. And the last thing I wanted to share with you guys is, before you go into this whole world, you should really have outlets for support. Because of the uncertainty of startup life, it can be really hard mentally, and it can be really hard physically. And I think it leads to a lot of this, just the nature of it means that it leads to a lot of overwhelming anxiety, which can sometimes be coped with addiction or substance abuse. And I feel like this is something that people don't say a lot, but you look under the hood a little bit, and every time I talk to a fellow CEO, they just look dead in the eyes. So I thought I should tell you guys that it's really important to have that support system, because it's going to be rocky, it's going to be crazy, right? And so one of the things that people often refer to is having their own personal board of advisors. I like to think of it as my own personal group of people I can panic call, like people I will call like at any point of the day, any point of the night, who I can be really vulnerable with, who I can vent to, cry to, talk through a situation, and I feel like they're going to give me the real scoop. So all this stuff, before you jump into a startup, super important, I think, and things that I wish I had known before I jumped into one myself. And so, the next part of this, I wanted to share some questions that are important to ask before you jump into joining a company. I think a lot of people kind of dive in without knowing even the basics of what they're getting themselves into, and I wanted to share some ideas of things that you could be asking. So the things that I generally tell my friends or folks to look into are 3 categories, which is team, traction, and technology. When it comes to the team, it really comes down to if you believe in the leadership team or not, right? I don't know if you guys have been tracking some of this crazy tech news lately, but a lot of this stuff comes down to the leadership team that is supporting you. Are these people who have started companies before? Have they launched products? And if not, that's okay. There's a lot of first-time founders who are incredible. So do you believe in that person to be able to attract amazing talent and amazing leaders, right? Do they have advisors? Do they have people around them that are going to help elevate the company and get them to the next stage? Other things that are really important is to make sure you're aligned with the values of the company and the culture, because that really dictates the environment you're going to be in, the kinds of things that will happen on the day-to-day, the kinds of perks you're going to get, things like that, and really shape the people who are working around you. And the last thing is having high psychological safety and having a voice is really important, right? Because you don't want to just jump in and not feel like you can really contribute. That's not really as fulfilling or part of the journey, right? You really want to be in a place where you can actively be a part of the decision making, really be able to vocalize what's going on. Those are some of the things I usually share with people to look into when you're thinking about joining a startup. As far as traction, I think oftentimes people conflate the amount of funding a company has with the traction they have. And I'm just going to tell you right now that funding is never the goal, right? Just raising the funding is never the goal. It's actually when everything starts. When you raise a round of funding, the expectations go up higher and higher with every round you raise in terms of the revenue you should be generating and the growth of the company, right? And so we've seen a lot of crazy headlines over the last year of companies who raised huge rounds at huge valuations, and they got to be able to keep up at a very aggressive pace now. And that means that if you can't make those expectations, what will end up happening is the company will drop in valuation, or they'll have to raise what's called a down round, which isn't good for you as an employee or for the company. And so those are some things I wanted to highlight off the bat, because I think it's hard to get that signal clearly when you're just reading a bunch of tech news and you're not really sure what the actual specifics are. Other things to think about are, this is why, aside from funding, it's so important to understand, does this company have strong fundamentals, right? I have so many friends who've joined companies without even knowing how they make money, right? And you've got to know that, because that's going to dictate how you get paid, how the company gets paid, how you guys grow, right? So understand the fundamentals. Is it a high margin business, right? What does the retention of customers look like? Look at the basics. Look at some of these things and get educated on what's going on there. Ask if they know what it takes to get to profitability. I think that's a very hot topic in the industry right now, is getting to profitability is more important than just pure growth. And that's why we're seeing a lot of the changes in the climate right now. Does the team know what it takes to get to an exit? This is directly also tied to how much funding the company has. One of the things that I think people don't really talk about a lot is when you raise an enormous round. So when you raise $100 million, for example, at $1 billion plus valuation, you have walked through a one-way door. You pretty much have to exit by going IPO. And most companies don't make it to an IPO. And the reason for that is because at that point, for you to make a return, you got to pay those investors back that $100 million, right? And you've already got this very high valuation. The only way for you to make this a positive outcome is for you to IPO. Who's going to acquire you at $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion plus, right? There are not that many companies out there making acquisitions that big. So you should really be asking these startups if they have an idea of what their exit options look like, and do they even have more than one option on the table, right? There's other ways to exit. There's getting acquired. There's being really profitable and paying dividends. I think this is something people don't talk about a lot either, and it's becoming more interesting and coming back as a factor. Other things to kind of think about, what does the addressable market look like? Is this actually like a big thing, or is it just something for like 10 users, right? You want to make sure that this is something that can grow and scale over time. How happy are the customers who are using it? Do people even like using the product? These are things that are all tied to traction, signals that you can look for. And the last piece is technology. I bring this up mainly if you're looking at a tech startup. But is it the right timing? Sometimes it's not, right? Like a autonomous driving startup 15 years ago is probably a little bit too early, right? So think about if this is the right timing for that technology to hit the market. Is this actually a great product? Is it a great user experience? You should probably try the product before you join the company. I don't know if that's something that happens enough, but you definitely should. See if it's something you like, see if it's something you can talk about with interest and passion and keep working on and spend a lot of time on. Is it really solving a big pain point? And do you have a sense of where this is all headed, right? Today it might be different from next year's roadmap. So like, where is this going long term and over a longer period of time? And depending on the stage of the company, they might not know the answers to that, and that's okay too, right? You got to be open to that ambiguity. But you got to really, again, then be able to trust the business fundamentals, trust the leadership team that you're joining, and really be able to figure that journey out. And the reason why I bring up all these things is when you are joining a startup, these are the questions that our investors are asking the startup too, right, to make an investment. And you becoming an employee of that startup, you're essentially an investor too, right? I mean, you get equity for working there. And you're investing your most precious resource, which is time. So it's really important to do this diligence just for yourself before jumping into things. So hopefully you guys were able to get some useful takeaways from this, and something a little bit more actionable. I hope that I could share a few things that were things I wish I had known. And as my CTO at Mason likes to tell me, you get to build your own reality. You get to own your own journey, right? And I hope that you do that by also doing something that scares you just a little bit every single day, today, tomorrow, day after that. Thank you, guys. I think we're going to take some questions now.
Yeah, good job.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Nancy. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So here's your water first and foremost.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, yeah. So what's scaring you today? What makes you afraid in your job as CEO?
So many things.
Yeah, like what?
There's like a constant kind of mix. And for me, I think the success of a startup boils down to the people. It's really simple for me. You could have the most important technology in the world and have this big vision and mission, but if you don't have a team that's really bought in, really cares, is really working well together, nothing's gonna happen, right? And so for me, oftentimes a lot of what I worry about comes down to our people and how they're feeling, how they're doing. Do they have the tools they need to succeed? Because if they've got that and they're bought into our culture, mission, vision, all that stuff, I know we'll figure out anything. We can build anything. So that's part of it.
And those people and building that team seems like it's been a tremendously big part of what you've done since you came into the CEO role over from the president role. Talk a little bit about what you've looked for in that hiring, what it is that you've had to contend with and fight with. I'm thinking about some of the notable hires you've had who have been senior notable people from big tech who you've convinced to come over to Mason. What has that experience been like, and what's been the challenge with it?
Yeah, it is so hard because the best people obviously have a lot of options, right? And so the thing that I've learned the most about recruiting and finding great people who will stick with you, no matter how senior they are experienced, it does boil down to some of the same factors, which is, do you have good chemistry? Or is this somebody who shares the same underlying values, right? This is why having company values that everybody's living by is so important. Because you could get somebody super experienced, amazing on paper, they come in and they're a train wreck, and they're super, just nobody can work with this person, or they're really destructive, or they are very aggressive in ways that you didn't expect, right? And that can really shake up and kind of mess up what you've built very quickly. So the culture is one aspect of it. The second is if you're aligned on like what the outcome needs to be, and just making sure that you guys have the same expectation of what you're getting yourself into. I've had to do a lot of different types of recruiting, like everything, just from our very first recruiters, product managers, engineers, executives, and it's a different flavor of this every time, but those are some of the fundamentals. But I'm happy to talk about like specific situations.
Yeah,
too.
and I want to get into those, but before we do that, I want to give the students a little bit more of an understanding of Mason, of what it is that you guys are doing, why you've been able to grow as fast as you have. Give us the 101, give the pitch deck, if you will, to them on Mason, what it is, why it's valuable, why it's been so successful over the past few years.
Yeah, for sure. I think part of it is timing, has been really advantageous to us. So basically, I think everybody here is aware of the Internet of Things, and that whole promise that the Internet of Things provided us of like connected schools and cities and infrastructure and all this stuff. I don't think that ever happened, right? Like we got Amazon Dash buttons. And that's pretty much it. We got some refrigerators with tablets shoved in them that tell you if there's like oranges in there. And that's pretty much IoT today. And so the reason, our thesis behind why that is the case is because businesses don't have the right tools to build connected devices, connected fleets, connected infrastructure to go do that. Right now, if you want to do something like that, you're Delta Airlines, you're like, I need a phone for my flight attendant, I need a scanner for my baggage claim folks, I got a big kiosk at the airport, I got my gate agent with a tablet, right? You have to piece together all this stuff. You got to buy like basically iPads or consumer devices or just like a whole hodgepodge of things to be able to make that happen. And so we're providing all the hardware, software, and services to be able to do that in a really seamless way.
And besides the airline market, give us other examples of markets you're serving by doing
Yeah,
that.
healthcare and government have been a big focus for us. One of the use cases in healthcare is remote patient monitoring. So companies use our devices to help conduct remote patient monitoring for people with epilepsy or cardiac health issues. They're constantly pinging data to one of our devices, which then tells them what's going on, and they can alert a healthcare professional if something's gone wrong.
And I was, you heard me talking to the students a little bit about when I first met your brother, who was running the company, who founded the company.
Yeah.
It was a tiny house, and it's like, oh my gosh, and now you guys have grown to what you have.
Yeah.
And then you come over after
Yep.
having some time in big tech to come on as the president of the company, while Jim, your brother's the CEO. And then in 2019, you switch roles. What has that challenge been like? How has that impacted your ability to lead a company in this realm?
Yeah, I would say working with a sibling is not for everyone. Like, it's really not. And I think the reason why it works for us is because we're so different but so complementary. He's super creative. He's super big, blue sky, and just not scared of anything. We'll take something from 0 to 1. I'm more structured. I'm a little bit sort of the yin to his yang there. And I think working with a sibling, one of the biggest things that I've really loved about it is you feel like this is someone you can totally be unfiltered with. No one's going to judge you, right? We're always the hardest on each other. We give each other the toughest feedback. We know what triggers each other, right? We are sort of like watching for the other person's blind side oftentimes. And so that's been really, really special. He's still with the company, by the way. If you guys watch the show, Succession on HBO, we are not like that, is what I like to tell people. It was not, that was not the vibe for us.
That's funny. So you come over and you join the company. Your brother's the head of the chain at the company. And then you move into leadership role. And to your comment about ensuring that your team believes in the values and understands that everyone's on the same page, did that present a situation where the people on the team looked at it as like, oh, this is nepotism. Oh, Nancy doesn't deserve this role. Oh, she's just Jim's brother. If so, how do you communicate around that? How do you ensure that the team coalesces and comes underneath your leadership in a real supportive way?
Yeah, that was definitely a challenge. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you, oh, it was just like roses and unicorns. Like, of course, I walked into a situation that was difficult. There's probably 20-ish people at the company at the time. Many of them had been there from the beginning.
20 in like 2019 to 80 something.
Yeah, exactly. And the composition of the team looked very different then, and it was really hard, right? Because I had to try to build an identity for myself and a leadership presence for myself while getting an understanding of the business, while being in this type of position I'd never been in before, and try to be like, yes, we're siblings, but also I'm my own human. And I think people sometimes think walking into the company like, oh, they're siblings, they're just gonna like be in cahoots all the time, and they're just gonna back each other up, but we disagree on so many things. We're very much like our own sort of people in that sense, and so that's actually played to our strengths here.
To your point about developing your own leadership, developing your own brand, and then having the team come over to you go from 20 to 80 some over the course of like 3 years now.
Yeah.
But that's not just representative of what you did to change the culture or to build the culture even further. Talk to us a little bit about the importance you put on diversity in hiring, equality and parity of gender within that, and then how did that go over with the team? And was it something that needed to be changed? Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. I think up until the point I joined, which is very normal and natural, and I don't fault them for this, the focus was...
Jim's a great guy.
Yeah,
just
yeah.
For the record,
I got to see him at Thanksgiving, so,
Yeah.
I can't rag on him too much. But the company was focused on building something. It was building proof of concept and getting customers. It wasn't thinking about what kind of company do we want to become and the kind of culture we want to become. And that stuff doesn't just like fall out of the sky and just you have this amazing realization. You really have to build at the type of place you want to be. And it was really important to me, having lived in the Bay Area for 5 years, seeing the Valley, having friends working at all these different startups. And it was really important to me that we build a different type of tech company and one that put diversity and inclusivity at the front of everything we did. I think there's this narrative that you get that like the hard-charging CEO who yells at people and cusses them out on Slack, which my friends worked at companies like this. You get fired on the spot if you like say the wrong thing. Like that, I think that culture actually hinders a company from being successful. It doesn't push it forward, right? Because it scares the hell out of anybody who's working there. There's no psychological safety. And so I feel like what we started with in 2019 was really thinking about, we actually changed our values and our company mission vision. We actually kind of redid all of that in 2019 on what kind of place we want to be, and then really going after leaders, people who embody that, and then would help us carry that mission forward. Like that your internal mission of the company you want to be is, I would say, arguably as important as your external product, facing mission. Because again, it comes down to the people. They're the ones who are going to make this thing happen, right? So that was a big part of what we had to do. And so through that journey, we were able to really bring in a much more diverse group of people. And ultimately, I think to build the strongest product, it requires people from different walks of life. Because the people who are using our products are nurses, they're doctors, they're all kinds of end users at the end of this, and we want to reflect that diversity in our own team as well.
Getting that perspective, from those who are actually building and kind of distributing it.
Yeah.
You're doing all of this in one of the ecosystems that has blown up and for tech and has blown up for startups and is just constantly now in a situation where people are becoming more like they were in the Bay Area, where it's like 2 years here, 2 years there, here's 2 years, and hop all over, and there's fights all over. The retention of your employees is partially based in the culture that you're creating, but you as a leader, how are you inspiring these employees that you have to stay with the company, to know that they're with the best opportunity that they could get out there, that they're the right place?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always tell people that I want them to come to Mason and do the best work of their careers. Like, I want them to be nostalgic about working here. But I also want them to use this as a launch pad to whatever is next for them. I don't want people to stay here forever. I don't believe that that's actually the goal for most people. If they want to go run their own company or do something else, or start a wine shop, like, I hope that we contribute to that in some way. And so for me, it's about making sure that they have strong teams, peers, leaders, clarity on what they're supposed to be doing, what it looks like to grow. So when we were about maybe 35 people, we implemented a leveling system, expectations, like just a lot more clarity around what that looks like, because we wanted progress in their career to be equitable and obvious. So in a lot of startups, that stuff doesn't exist. And basically the way you get a promotion is you have to go to the CEO and ask for one. And I was like, no. This is not, what about the person who's never gonna speak up, right? But is a high performer, right? So we wanted to make sure all that stuff was laid out really clearly. So it's a combination of the support that you bring to the table, what you really believe in as a leader. And it also comes down to the managers and the teams who they're being led by, right? Because ultimately it doesn't come down to me, right? And that's the whole point. I can't possibly know every facet of what someone is doing. It's all about the other people who are there to support them.
To that note about managing people and not being able to always know what someone's doing, you have a non-tech background in terms of your technical education and training, but you're managing those who are working on highly technical aspects of a hardware software company's build out. What challenges has that presented to you? Do you have to overcome an imposter syndrome situation with them? Talk to us about that. We have a lot of students who, of course, don't have that technical background and who want to go into a similar
for
position.
sure. Yeah, I thought, and incorrectly for a long time, that you kind of had to be a software engineer to be able to do a lot of this stuff. And what I've learned is you just need to really understand the bigger picture a little bit better. I'm never going to be the best engineer, right? That is not what I've been doing. That is not the craft I've been building, and that's okay. I'm never going to be the best hardware person or designer or whatever. So I leaned into what I knew I could do. I can communicate. I can bring people together. I can try to get everybody on the same mission, vision page, and really keep ourselves going. And I think that is ultimately the goal of the best leader. It's not for you to be the best at every single thing. It's for you to be able to elevate your team, spot their strengths, elevate them where they're really strong, and spot their weaknesses and be able to find ways to get around that, right? And really paint a clear picture of what's next. It's definitely scary. It was really hard, especially in the beginning, recruiting somebody. Like, I'll give you an example. Our CTO is incredible, right? If you guys ever played like Quake or Doom back in the day, he literally worked on those games.
Time,
like,
everybody.
Yeah, probably. Oh, sorry, maybe the PhD students or something. He's a legend, right? And I recruited him to be our CTO after he worked at Facebook for 9 years. And he was running all of engineering for Marketplace. He had launched Oculus Quest Portal. He didn't even know who I was when I worked there, right? Like, we had one interaction. People always think like, oh, you guys both worked at Meta. You must have known each other a long time. I'm like, no, talked to him once. Like, I was literally just like a random person, and he was running a lot of stuff. And so, yeah, it was really scary of like, I'm trying to recruit him, first of all. That's just insane. The second thing is, like, he reports to me, right? Like, do I know the first thing about system on chip architecture? Like, no, right? And is he way more seasoned than me? Yes, 100%, totally, right? And so you got to figure out, like, what that person is strong at and what you're strong at, your chemistry, what you guys believe in, how you're going to form a really great partnership and really recognize that. And I think the thing that's really helped me is by just being really open and honest about what I don't know. I'm the first to ask dumb questions in meetings. If I don't know what something stands for, I'm going to ask, right? If I don't know what's going on, I'm going to ask. And in opening up that conversation allows other people to feel like they can be vulnerable and open too.
You were talking earlier about hacks and about hacks that you've kind of used, which I love and I think is great. And maybe we can get you to write them down and we'll send them out to everybody so that they know. Talk to us about recruiting as a CEO for students who want to go into a role where they're going to be in a position to recruit. Give them recruiting hacks.
Ooh, I've got some. Okay, here's the best thing you can do. Find something
Drum
that's
roll,
like,
please.
yeah, like go on their product, find something that's wrong, or find a typo on their website or whatever. Just try the thing, or use the thing, give them some feedback, and just email it to the CEO or head of product or whoever you want to talk to, and just say, hey, I just like found some stuff. Also, like, I have some skills. If you want an intern, what do you think, right? Okay. That is the reason why that works is because you're bringing some value to the relationship, right? This is somebody
you're giving before you're asking.
You're giving, exactly. That is the whole point of this, of everything, I think. Like, and I remember in college when I would meet some of these people or do these things, I'd have friends or peers be like, oh, you're like really good at networking. And I like almost threw up in their face. I'm like, I legitimately, like those networking events they have at school, I don't go to them. Like that is not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to meet people, learn something, maybe help them in some way. Like even if I don't really have anything to add to someone like Dan Gilbert, I'll still offer. Like even in school, I was like, is there anything I can do to help you? Like, I don't know, right? And you'd be surprised. Sometimes there is something that you can do. And that's how you build a real friendship. That's how you build a real relationship. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. It's not about just asking or networking or something like that.
I love it. Thinking back to when you were a student here and you were understanding how people thought you were good at networking and you were kind of honing that craft and skill set, talk a little bit and just kind of do a little storytell, if you will, about Duo and Doug, because that's not to be overlooked.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh, yeah. We actually drove by the tech brewery to get here.
That's awesome.
So when I was a freshman, it was my very first semester, I came on a campus. I was like, I did this thing called Startup Weekend in Seattle, and I was like, I want to bring that to Michigan. And it would take fundraising like $5,000 or $10,000 to put on this event. And I was a freshman. Like, I didn't even know what, by the way, when I got to Michigan, I didn't even know there was a North Campus. So that was like a whole thing. Like, I was from Seattle. Nobody comes to Michigan from Seattle.
No one comes to North Campus. Yeah.
And so I was like very clueless, but I was very determined to make this happen. And so I like went around. I was like, who are some people who work in startups or whatever in the area that I can talk to? And one of those people I met my freshman like fall semester was Doug Song, because he would always run these brewery events on Fridays or something, just like a happy hour. So I showed up, told him what I was trying to do. he was like, oh yeah, we need that. And he's like, here's some people who can help sponsor you and all that stuff. And that became a friendship and mentorship that evolved over time too. It was someone I just kept in touch with. I saw him around all the time. And then my sophomore summer, I did a program called the New England Literature Program, which is called NELP, which was the best thing I ever did at Michigan. So shameless plug, where you go into the woods for 6 weeks with no internet or devices, and you just like journal a lot and hike. The second part of that summer, I wanted to do an internship, and Doug had just started a company called Duo Security, and there was like 10 people. And I was like, let's do it. He's like, you could do product marketing. I didn't know what that was. And I was like, sure, whatever. Like, I'm a little freaked out, but like, let's do it. I trust you. And so I spent that summer working for Duo. It was literally 10 people in the tech brewery. And it was, now like, look where they ended up. I should have dropped out of school. Yeah. Probably should have just stayed there, but yeah.
You did okay.
Yeah, but I mean, I just met with him like a month ago or so just to catch up, and these are just lifelong friends who are there for you, That's why it's so important to come in with like the mindset of I'm not here to network and just like get something out of you. I'm here to just, I think you're interesting. And sometimes it doesn't work. Like sometimes you meet someone, you have no chemistry, and you're like, that was the worst coffee meeting. I'm like, this was so uncomfortable, and that's okay too. It's not going to be, batting 1,000.
But you're willing to go out and follow your genuine curiosity and interest and kind of chase it down. It's awesome.
Totally.
I'll turn it over to them. Genuine curiosity and interest. Who's got questions out there that we can kind of pose? Sebastian's working his way down from the top. Be patient with him. Those are steep stairs. Don't fall, Sebastian.
Hello. Since you've worked at Oculus, and I guess you might have seen this coming, is metaverse the future?
I think that's a good question. I think there's some other things that need to be in play for the metaverse to be really successful, and it was a struggle and work in progress when I was there too, which is the tools to build a virtual reality app are not as accessible yet. Like if you look back at the iPhone and the App Store and the rise of all that, it became more and more streamlined to build a mobile app, right? That was a big part of it. The developer ecosystem was going. When it comes to a virtual reality app, it takes years, right? You have to have all these other skills like 3D modeling and artists and game engineers and things like that, and it can be really costly to develop something. It can take like 2 or 3 years, whereas, Flappy Bird, I don't know how long that guy spent on it, but it was pretty quick, and then he saw a pretty quick payday from it. We're not quite there with VR yet, and I think when those tools start becoming more available and you see richer apps and developers on the platform, I think that's when you're going to see a very different change in that ecosystem. Okay,
going down to another question. While he's doing that, I'll pose this to you. You're somebody who's known to drop a swear word on occasion. And you're a really good communicator too, so there's got to be some intentionality sometimes when you drop those. What's your favorite, most effective word to drop?
It really depends. It's not even sometimes a swear word. Sometimes it's just like, this is a fucking garbage can. Like, okay. I don't know, like this, I don't know how to describe it.
It's the inflection, it's the tone. Is okay.
Yeah, this is a dumpster fire, and I don't know what to do about that. Good and that's it, yeah.
Another hack, love it.
So a lot of the speakers who come here, I feel like at least the impression I get is they love their job, but they hate the stress that comes with it. Is there anything that you don't like about the job itself, apart from like the stress? Like I personally, I don't have a lot of experience with like management and I guess leadership, but I feel like I'm more of a technical person. So even though like I want to start my own company and make my own product, I feel like I wouldn't like that aspect of it. So like, do you think there's things that you don't like about the job that maybe just get overshadowed by how passionate you are about the product?
Oh, for sure. I think there's different things at different stages, first of all. So like I would probably give you a really different answer a couple years ago or even 6 months ago than I would now. It is really stressful, and I'm glad you bring that up because I really, people don't talk about this enough, and it is hard mentally. And I think the thing that's really hard that I struggle with, and I think I've developed ways of dealing with this, is when you're in a role like this, it feels like your identity gets fragmented in a lot of different ways, like Voldemort Horcrux style or something. Like, there's like the version of you with investors. There's the version with you of your employees and with your family and with your partner and all these different things. And you're just like, who am I even? Like, there's a real identity crisis in that. And you're trying to tell a different narrative like all the time because there's only certain things you can share with certain groups, right? And that fragmentation feels really weird. It can also feel really weird to be the same age as like your employees and not necessarily be able to have the same kind of relationship with them. I love that people at my company, I watch them develop lifelong relationships. Like that is really rewarding when I see people go off and they're like becoming best friends, right? But can I just like hop in there and like be like, hey, what's up? Like it's not the same because again, the fragments of your identity and the role you're playing is just very different. And I think that part has definitely been hard. And so the secret to that, I think, is to, again, have people outside of the environment itself, right? Have sources of support. But the other aspect is like the secret is you don't have to do everything yourself, right? And the things that you struggle with, maybe it's, some of the technical stuff or accounting or whatever, bring in someone who complements you, who can help you with that kind of stuff. Like something that I've really struggled with is being, having a really high bar for accountability and like really driving that home and being intense about that. Like I don't raise my voice, I don't get that elevated. I'm not a very like emotionally up and down person. And I'm not saying go find a person who's that, right? Like, but what I was able to find is somebody who is able to communicate that kind of accountability in a way that I wasn't comfortable with, and really complement each other that way.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely.